All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is 11 o'clock in the morning, and our next session is Miss Halcyon Frank. Halcyon is a trainer and public speaker with a decade of experience as a 911 dispatcher. Combining real-world insights with academic expertise, Halcyon holds a degree in training and development and is certified as both an emergency number professional by NINA, sorry, and an associate professional in talent development by the Association for Talent Development. She also continues to be a member of the front line, dispatching at a small center in eastern Nebraska. And her session that she is sharing today is Calm in the Chaos, Brain-Friendly Wellness Practices for Dispatchers. So, Halcyon, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. Um, I'm coming from a very chilly Niagara Falls as I got to be up here for the APCO Canada conference, which is always exciting. And if you ever get the chance, if you're not already here, to make it up for one of their conferences, I highly encourage it. Always a good time. But today we are talking about calm in the chaos, those brain-friendly wellness practices for dispatchers. And where this comes from is we talk a lot about mental health, which is fantastic. We've made a lot of progress. Um, and because of where I am, I wanted to be like, we made a lot of progress, but I'm from Nebraska, so it's progress. Um, and we're doing well, except we still have some room that we can continue to grow as we you talk about integrating down regulation and stress reduction techniques and those things into our job and really layering it in and making it more normal. Because I think part of the reason we don't do it now, or because it seems weird now, is just because we haven't integrated it and we're not doing it as often as we should. So it seems very odd versus if we really started to layer it in, it would just be normal thing that we all do, and nobody would think twice about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about stress and the effects that it has on us specifically. And then we'll go into how do we handle it? One, when we're sitting at the console, and then two, just in general, what are those strategies to help with it? So first is a question for those of you who are watching. How does stress affect your ability to think? Like when you know that you are getting very stressed out, how do you feel? Like everybody is able to access the chat. Yeah, I'd be short-tempered. Yes, definitely. Scattered thoughts, tired usually goes along with it. We can't remember stuff. Excuse me. A little snappy. Yes, some of us before stress and then just worsens. It would feel very all over the place. I feel like when those things start to pile up, no matter what it is going on, whether it's professional stress, whether it's work stress, or excuse me, home stress, whatever, you just start to feel like all over the place, like exactly like squirrel can't function. Um, and so we know a lot of times too, that's an indicator for ourselves that we're getting very stressed. And that ties into what is happening in our brains when these things happen. And so in our brain, we have, if you've heard of it, and I think Brandy just mentioned it in the session before, actually, your amygdala. And there's a two-word term, two F-word term. Feel free to throw it in the chat. They've added some Fs as well. Those two basics that really kick in when we reach a certain level of stress or a certain threshold or window, that causes us to really kind of focus in on what we're doing. And that is the fight or flight. When we kick in, excuse me, when that kicks in, we really lose the ability and we stop having the ability to really think critically about stuff and logically. And there's a reason for that. If anybody watching knows, what is the primary goal of your brain? Since we've been evolving, since the beginning of time, we've existed, what has been the primary goal of your brain? It's a little quiz this morning. Oh. Jennifer, super fast. Survival, yes. Excuse me, I've been talking a lot, so I'm trying to make sure I keep a voice. Survival, yeah, to keep us safe, essentially. Exactly. And so when we reach a level of stress, no matter what it is, it used to be that like it was a bear or a tiger or somebody else, that is trying to hurt us. Now, for a lot of us, it's like an email or a difficult conversation. But at the end of the day, our brain doesn't necessarily know that, like, oh, this is just an email. It can't actually like physically harm me. It just sees that as stress because for whatever reason, that email is stressing us out. And in our minds, it's a bear, even though sometimes it does feel really silly how stressed we get about an email when, years and years and years ago, like their stress was a literal bear trying to kill them. But it's fine. Modern day problems um, require modern solutions, if you will. So, yes, at the end of the day, we are always going for survival. And so, what's happening in our brain is when we get really stressed and our brain goes, okay, we kind of don't care about anything else right now. Like, we're just trying to survive, whatever the threat is. It shuts down our ability to really like think critically, like I mentioned. And your prefrontal cortex, kind of the front part of your brain, um, excuse me, I'm not sure what happened to my sound. See if I don't know. I didn't hit anything. I don't know if that helps at all. Um,
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm seeing low volume in the chat. I mean, you're all the way on mine. Patrick, are
okay.
you having a hard time hearing
I didn't touch anything. So,
her? Oh, it's sounding a little bit louder.
okay. Maybe I'll just talk really loud. Does that help at all? We'll just go with that.
Okay.
Okay. We'll
Don't
just,
blow your voice.
it's fine. So when we start to get stressed, that the communication between our amygdala that's kicked into fight or flight shuts down with our prefrontal cortex, part of which controls logical decision making. And these are the same things I think we forget, but this is the same thing that's happening with our callers in emergency situations. If you ever had a caller who you're giving instructions to or you're asking questions and it just doesn't seem like they're thinking straight or they're putting two and two together, that's a big part of it. Those pieces of their brain, it's kicked into like I'm just trying to survive, and so it's not worried necessarily about communicating with the dispatcher to get them information because our brains don't attach that to that survival piece. And so it's the same thing for us that we're not, we don't think about things logically as much or because we're just trying to focus on that survival piece. And that really helped for me, at least, and hopefully for some of you, if you didn't know that, learning about that, especially in dispatch, and just knowing that when it feels like we're shutting down because we're stressed, that's being human. That's not that, oh, this person isn't fit for the job or they can't do it as well. It's just part of being human. That you're going to lose out on some of that logical decision making when we reach certain levels of stress. And we all have different levels, right? Like, and it's not necessarily, oh, I've been through a lot in my life, so I have a really high threshold for stress, or someone perceive it as haven't been through a lot, so they have a low one. It's very personal, and it also ties into what kind of, coping mechanisms do we have in place? Are we able to handle a lot of stress? And so looking at it just from that of like our brains are always aiming for survival. And so when anything threatens that, it's gonna hamper our ability to do our job, just like it hampers the ability of 911 callers to give us good information or to say logical things because their brain is just kicked into that survival mode. And a lot of us, I think, intuitively know that stress can affect our brains, especially when we're talking long-term chronic stress. But as I mentioned, with that short-term stress, that's going to be the increased activity in your amygdala, the fight or flight, which leads to the reduced activity in your prefrontal cortex, lower cognitive functioning in the moment. And then you also do have stress hormones that are released that we're not going to go into that are kind of above and beyond my scope of knowledge. But there's a lot going on in our bodies physically when we get stressed. And so when we're talking too in a little bit about the strategies to help that, it's not that these are like feel good or because, this is what we read about that we should do. It's because these are literally the things that are going to positively impact our brain and help reduce that impact of the stress. And then the long term, because the job we do, right? Like it's gonna be long term. Um, we can't go into it thinking like, no, this job won't stress me out. It will, but that doesn't necessarily mean like it's a bad job. I love doing this job, and I hope many, if not all of you, love it as well. But that's also where it comes in more important that we know these strategies because that's also what's going to help our longevity in our careers. Because those long-term stress effects, again, you can actually have structural changes to your brain when you're experiencing ongoing chronic stress, and it impacts things like memory. People mention, I feel like I can't remember simple stuff. And again, with your fight or flight, um, always activating that. You also, just in general, that impaired cognitive function, altered brain chemistry, along with those structural changes. And then you do have that increased risk of those mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, PTSD, those things that, again, over time, we see a lot in our careers and amongst our coworkers and our peers because of this prolonged exposure to stress. And probably a lot of this is not new information for you. This is stuff that we hear about. But it's just a reminder that, again, I think sometimes it's helpful to look at it as not like, oh, stress is bad, because there is some good stress, but stress is going to be a part of our life and a part of this job. And so, how can we approach it more from kind of a logical perspective of this is what's going on in my brain. That amygdala kicks in, fight or flight, prefrontal cortex, that communication is shut down. I can't make as good decisions. So, what can I do in those moments to bring my stress back down and allow me to then make the decisions I need to make in the critical role that we work in, that is, literally at times life or death. So just a reminder, simply put, a long period of chronic stress can harm the human brain. Like as it says, scientific studies are absolutely clear on this point. Like it's not a maybe or a what if, like it's going to happen. This is also one of my top favorite books, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. I highly recommend it if you are in the market to look for a new nonfiction read. Talking about stress on the brain, especially, and connecting with other people and kind of along those topics. And it's about the brain, but I promise you it's not like a tough read. It's not super sciencey or anything like that. So one of the big things too for ourselves is, can we tell that we are getting stressed? So in the chat, just share like how can you tell? It might have been same as what you mentioned before, like how it affects your brain, but in general, what are the things that you notice and you're like, okay, I've got to take a deep breath, or like this indicates to me, because half the battle is just even being able to recognize when we need to implement some of the strategies that we're going to talk about. So how do we know when we're getting it? Or excuse me, getting stress? Easily irritated. Yeah, the heart starts racing, I think is one of the easiest common examples. If you're like me and you're like looking at your Apple Watch, like, oh, that's a little high. I want to bring that down. Feelings of overwhelmed, again, that short-tempered. We're kind of on edge. We can't settle down. I found that that's how I know I'm getting stressed, if I feel very like all over the place. Um, as someone like with ADHD, I feel like that is a good indication if I'm just like, I cannot focus. Not that I can focus that well on a regular day, but if I even more so, like then I know that my stress is creeping up there. Yeah, and sometimes my watch, like my heart rate will feel high and I'm like, oh, I feel okay. And the funny part to me is, then again, as someone with like anxiety, I'm like, is there something I should be stressed about? And now I'm stressed that I'm not stressed about being stressed about something. And then now I'm stressed because did I forget something? And it's a very vicious cycle. If you are anything like me, you know how that feels. Um, and also with anxiety and worrying, then like I don't even have to be stressed. I'll find something to stress about. What do you got going on in your life? I'll stress about it for you. Some of us, I think, are just naturally great at stressing. So all these things lead, like that's how we tell. So again, when we talk about implementing these strategies too, part of that is just recognizing the signs for ourselves. Because sometimes we're around other people all the time and they may recognize it and we may not, but also vice versa. There's people who we know that handle things really well. And then you find out later, like they were incredibly stressed. And you're like, I had zero idea. You know, you look like everything was fine. And so we can kind of do that to ourselves as well, where we're like, I'm fine, I'm fine. And it's like, we are not fine. So, first and foremost, we have to be able to recognize that. Within the center, especially if you are a trainer, this is also a great question to ask your trainees if they know the signs for themselves of when they're getting stressed, because then you as the trainer can also key in. Because we know that when people are really stressed, they're not learning. Far less likely to retain information when they've reached their own stress threshold. And so if we can have an honest conversation about, hey, what does that look like for you? What are the kind of the signs? Then again, we as the trainer can even maybe mention to them like, okay, I think you're getting a little stressed. We're going to do some down regulation or we're going to take a break, help bring you back down, and then we'll jump back into the learning because right now it's not going to land because your stress is just too high. So not only for ourselves, but even for the people around us, even for, our work bestie that sits next to us, so we can kind of help them like, whew, okay, you need a break, even if you don't realize it, like you go take that. I'll handle it here. So another question for those of you watching, if you thought you weren't going to have to interact in this session, you were wrong. Um, how are you currently dealing with stress? What does that look like? Exercise, as and we'll talk about that movement is great. Prayer, just that kind of activity to help center ourselves as well. Hobbies, use my PTO and pray daily. Yes, use your PTO. I am not by any stretch saying like just call in sick for funsies, but it is not a badge of honor and it's tough sometimes like when we do awards for like not calling in sick. Like on one hand, I understand like why it's an award because it's a very measurable thing, but on the other hand, it kind of glorifies something that we shouldn't. Like it should not be a badge of honor that I've never called in sick. Now, if I've actually never been sick, then that's great. But there are a lot of us who are sick and are still coming to work because we feel that pressure, we feel that guilt, or, you know, we are like, oh, I got to be there to help people. If I'm not there, what's going to happen? So again, not just for fun, but don't just not call in sick because you feel like you have to be there. Take your sick time. There's a reason you get it. Use your PTO. There's a reason you get it. Again, there is no award in life. You are not better than anybody. You're not going to win a cash prize at the end of your life because you never took PO, you never took sick time. Walking, being in nature, spending time with family, talking to family, crafting, all great ways. I'm kind of surprised that nobody mentioned like going out and having a drink, which to an extent is not bad. And a lot of times I found for myself that usually is more centered around socialization than the drinking necessarily. Um, but there might be other stuff that people are doing as well. I just feel like usually that's a go-to for people is like have a few adult beverages. So I mentioned we were going to talk about how do we deal with it. Again, we all know about stress. We know, it's affecting us. It has its long-term effects. So first and foremost, we have to look at, okay, we can't really leave the console. Maybe for our breaks, maybe you can here or there, depending on the type of center you're in. But one of the things I think when you go to like a corporate wellness class, you can tell the difference between that and one that's really focused on dispatchers because they'll give a lot of suggestions, but they all require you to like leave the console. And you're like, ma'am, I have to answer 911 calls. Like I have to give CPR instructions. I can't just go for a walk because I'm stressed. Um, I can't put them on hold and say, well, I'm really stressed. So just hold pressure on that gunshot wound and I'll be back in a few. That will be the last 911 call you ever take, most likely. So, first and foremost, talking about down regulation at the console. Does anybody know what is the easiest way to, and by down regulate, I mean just bring your heart rate down, bring that nervous system down. What is the easiest way to down regulate your system at the console? Yes, breathing. And not necessarily just in and out, we're all breathing right now, but there are specific ways that we can breathe to really help. And it's so simple. And sometimes I'm like, why is this just not part of the job? Why are we not teaching this to everybody walking through the door? Because it's not hard. We don't need anything to do it, right? We just need ourselves. And we can do it at any given point. I mean, you can pull the phone or your headset away and do a deep breath. When you unkey the radio, instead of dropping F-bombs, like take a few deep breaths. These are very easy things to integrate that we just don't take advantage of a lot of times, or I think seem so simple that we don't even realize the impact that they can actually have. So I have a video, it's about 5 minutes, and I'm going to play that. Hopefully you guys can hear it. Just kidding. We're going to go to the internet to do it because I thought it might do this to me. So let me share a different screen. Play the little YouTube ad.
The right therapist. And let me tell you, game changer.
And it's for BetterHelp, so it fits anyway. Hopefully.
A few years ago, when my laboratory got interested in studying stress in humans, we asked ourselves, what are the patterns of breathing that allow for the most rapid reduction in stress levels? And more importantly, what are the patterns of breathing that can be done in real time so that people can adjust their stress while they're still engaging in life, right? Breathwork classes, running off to Esalen for a weekend is a magical experience, but life demands pressing on you. That's typically when you feel stress. So it is still true that vacation, long meditation retreats, and massages or a nice drink, if you're of drinking age, still work, but they're slow and they take you offline. The physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that was actually discovered by physiologists in the 30s, and that was essentially rediscovered by Professor Jack Feldman at UCLA, a world expert in the neurobiology of respiration, and by my colleague Mark Krasno at Stanford, who studies lung function. The physiological sigh is a pattern of breathing that we all engage in deep sleep when levels of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream get too high. We, or our dogs, you can see your dog do this, will do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale. Children or adults, for that matter, that are sobbing and lose their breath, so to speak, will also do a double inhale, exhale. That's the spontaneous execution of what we call the physiological sigh. The reason it works so well to relax us is because it offloads a lot of carbon dioxide all at once. And the way it works is the following. Our lungs are not just two big bags of air. We have all these little millions of sacs of air that if we were to lay them out flat, they would be as big as about a tennis court or so. The volume of air, therefore, and the volume of carbon dioxide that we can offload is tremendously high, except that we get stressed as carbon dioxide builds up on our bloodstream, and as kind of a double whammy, these little sacs deflate. Now, when we do a double inhale, so I'll do this now twice through my nose, or you could do this, or you could do it through your mouth, but it works best through the nose. It's inhale, and then you sneak a little bit more air in at the very end. When you do that, you reinflate those little sacs. And when you exhale, then you discard all the carbon dioxide at once. So the simple way to describe this protocol is that unless you are underwater, you do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale, and you offload the maximum amount of carbon dioxide. And we found in our laboratory, and other laboratories have found, that just 1, 2, or 3 of those physiological sighs brings your level of stress down very, very fast. And it's a tool that, you can use anytime. I do hope that people will kind of watch other people or dogs as they start to relax or go down to sleep. You'll see this pattern of breathing, but again, it can be consciously driven. The other thing about breathing, and the reason why exhales are so vital, is the following. I know there's a lot of interest nowadays in heart rate variability. Well, most people don't realize this, but your breathing is actually driving heart rate variability. So when you inhale, this dome-shaped muscle beneath your lungs, your diaphragm, actually moves down because the lungs expand, it moves down. When you do that, you create more space in the thoracic cavity, and the heart gets a little bigger, it actually expands. As a consequence, blood flows more slowly through that larger volume, and the brain quickly sends a signal down to the heart to speed the heart up. The short, simple version of this is inhales speed the heart up. When you exhale, the opposite is true. That dome-shaped muscle, the diaphragm, moves up. The space in your thoracic cavity gets a little bit smaller. The heart gets a little bit smaller. Blood moves more quickly through that small volume, and the brain sends a signal to the heart to slow the heart down. Physicians know this as respiratory sinus arrhythmia, but this is the basis of what we call HRV, heart rate variability. And the simple way to remember this is anytime you emphasize exhales, in other words, making them longer than your inhales, you are slowing the heart rate down, you're calming your system. Anytime you emphasize inhales, you make them more vigorous or longer than your exhales, you're speeding up your heart.
Hopefully that was insightful. Like I mentioned, that's one of my favorite videos to use. If you're not familiar with Andrew Huberman, he is a neuroscientist out of Stanford. He also does a podcast, which always has great information on it as well. Let me see if I can get back to sharing the right
Michelle, Black Friday sale is
screen.
back, and it's here on the 16th of November.
Up to 50% off site-wide.
It's noise. Okay. Hopefully we're back to the right screen. So again, breathing, easiest, simple to integrate, doesn't cost anything, don't have to do anything different. And that cyclic sigh or physiological sigh, as he referred to it. And again, as he mentioned, like if you have pets or little kids, or like when you're crying, you'll notice you do that to help. And so it really is like that exhale, right? So just and really focusing on that exhale to help slow the heart rate down. And when I asked what was the easiest, some of you mentioned this specifically, and that is box breathing. Again, there are other methods for breathing. There's the 4-7-8 method, and I'm sure there's other ones as well. But these are two of the most common and two that I actually use the most. And so I found box breathing to be incredibly helpful in those moments of high stress. And it's just as it says, you're breathing in for 4 seconds, you're holding it for 4 seconds, you're breathing out for 4 seconds, and then you hold for 4 seconds, and then you do it all again. And even as you mentioned, just a couple rounds of this or that physiological sigh can really start and help bring us down and bring that stress level back down. So whether it's for yourself, whether it's for a coworker, whether it's for a trainee, these are all things that can be done super simple at the console, even on a call or even when you're dispatching, and really encouraging each other to take advantage of this. So you have breathing for at the console, and then we have other strategies as well. Some of them we can do at the console, some of them do require us to step away, but for the most part can all be done at work. And the first one is meditation. I am a huge fan of the Calm app. But there's tons of other calms. You can get YouTube, you can do a 5-minute meditation, a 10-minute meditation. But this is really helpful to help just refocus your attention, take a few moments, kind of check in with your body, see what's going on, um, and really kind of just slowing down for a second. Because there's a lot of times when we get stressed, right? Like we have to like slow down to go faster. If we keep just going how we're going, we're going to make mistakes. Um, adverse reactions will happen. But it seems like we have to keep going, like we're in a hurry, things have to get done. But we kind of slow down to go faster in that. We take a moment, we take a deep breath, maybe we take the 5 minutes to meditate, and then we're able to be that much more efficient because we're not all over the place. The next one is feeling your senses. And you may be familiar with this one, but this is grounding and helps, again, get you back kind of in that moment so your mind isn't spinning all over the place. So it really is just about naming things. So in that moment, you'll tell yourself, or if you're with somebody, 5 things you can see. Just naming off 5 that you can see, 4 that you can feel. Maybe that's the clothes, maybe you feel the desk, you feel the keyboard. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. I do always add in there, if you're like me and you've ever cried in the bathroom at work, like feel free to skip the 2, like the things you can smell. Or I was teaching yesterday a similar session. I was like, actually, you know what? Don't skip it, because then maybe that will distract you so much that you won't be worrying as much about what you're worrying about because something smells terrible and you've now distracted yourself. Uh, both strategies could be helpful in that sense. But 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And again, it's that grounding exercise to bring you back into the present moment. So when it's stress, especially kind of got made stronger or increased by anxiety, this is a good way to come back into the moment. The next one, movement. Somebody mentioned exercise is huge. It just if you can't remember what there's a book and I'm blanking on what it's called, but they talk about completing the cycle. So when we get really stressed and we just sit with it, it almost kind of festers and can just like nothing ever gets resolved. So when we move our body, when we go for a walk, when we exercise, those kinds of things, it helps to complete that cycle and kind of get the stress out, if you will, and work through it. So exercise for a multitude of reasons is super helpful, but especially with that stress reduction. Even if you're not wanting to lose weight or anything like that, just moving your body, whatever that looks like. Maybe that's taking a walk. If you have young kids, my niece and nephews, absolutely huge fans of Danny Go. I don't know if I have any Danny Go fans in the audience today. But those are really fun videos to do with kids, and it gets you up and dancing and moving. And even doing that with them, I found has been really helpful. I don't do it by myself. I would just like to say that. Not that I would be embarrassed if I did, but I do it with them. Being out in nature, they have found really does help. Go outside. If you can leave the center, even just to go outside for 2 minutes, take some deep breaths of fresh air, and then go back inside, it can help as well. Christine in the chat mentioned tapping. Yes, tapping is also a way to help with that stress reduction. The next one is going to hurt a little bit. It's not a personal attack, but it's sleep. We just are so terrible about getting adequate sleep and rest in this job. And some of that is beyond our control in the sense that we're short-staffed, we're working overtime, but some of that is in our control. And so we really have to take the time to make sure to get the sleep. I know your favorite show is on, and I know what that's like, and I want to watch it. I get it. But if it's an hour of your favorite show or an hour of sleep, get the sleep. Get the sleep. If you take nothing else from this, protect your sleep. Make sure those around you know, hey, I need to get this rest. It's critically important for my job that I get rest, especially if you're in training. Like I mentioned, high stress really diminishes our ability to learn. And another thing, when we're learning, sleep is critical to storing all that information in our long-term memory. So if you're going to work and you're trying to learn all these things at this job, and then you're going home and not sleeping, excuse me, it's much more likely that you're not going to learn it because you have to get it. Someone mentioned they tell their people to go outside. Absolutely, especially right now when you, like you mentioned, you come to work in the dark, you leave in the dark, go outside if you don't have a window, get some of the vitamin D that you do have light therapy for that as well. But again, that sleep is so critical. And we also have to be careful about the behavior we're modeling for new people. If you've been in a class with me about training, I talk about this specifically as well for trainers. How are you talking about sleep around your new team members? Are you saying, oh, I got 2 hours. Oh, I got three. Like, oh, I took a 30-minute nap in the break room. Oh, when you've been in this job for a while, you'll be able to survive on just a few hours. Stop. We have to be conscientious of how are we talking about things like sleep in front of those new people, and are we setting them up to just get in the bad habit of not getting it? Or are we setting them up in a way that says, hey, I maybe didn't get a bunch of sleep, but I know how important that is. And so I really encourage you to do what you need to do in order to get enough rest. Don't worry about studying at home. Get sleep because honestly, I feel like that's going to help their learning more than, again, that extra hour of like studying time that they really shouldn't be doing because they're not getting paid for it. So not only do we need it for ourselves, but we also want to be cognizant of how are we talking about sleep with our coworkers, with our new people, what kind of um, precedent are we setting that we're all just very sleep deprived, or do we at least model that, hey, maybe we didn't get the most sleep, but we really try to prioritize it and get as much as we can. Getting ahead of myself here. And then lastly, one we don't always think of, but that is of staying connected. And I'm reading a book where this quote comes from, Why Brains Need Friends. And as it says, being isolated is a form of stress, and the brain and body treat it as such. It's associated with depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, and increased risk of death by any cause. It is easy nowadays to think we are connected because we have social media. I can reach out and talk to people around the world at any given time. And so it's given us this illusion that like I'm connected to people. I get on Facebook and comment on stuff all the time. I send emails. But we really have to remember to stay connected to people in person. We will not always like everyone we work with. I have not always liked everyone I work with, but at least finding people who we can talk to and keep those connections, even if it's just inside work, and then having those people outside of work we stay connected to, hugely helpful for our brain. Earlier, I asked you what, is our brain's primary goal, and that is survival. But does anybody know the other thing our brain figured out as far as what's helpful for survival? Give you a second, throw in the chat. See if anybody knows. Prime for survival and what is most helpful for survival. What is the easiest way to fight a bear? By yourself or with other people? Over time, we've not only been wired for survival, but also for connection because we found that survival is easier when we have community. When we get together and we join forces, we're much more powerful and able to do things, whether it's an actual physical threat to our life or, an issue at work or a problem we're trying to solve. And so our brain truly is, even for anybody who like me, who's like, I'm an introvert, I want to sit at home by myself, I don't want to talk to anybody. At a certain point, our brain is wired for connection and we're going to need it. And so it's very easy to leave the job and go, I had a super stressful day. I just want to go home. I just want to sit by myself, maybe with my dog, and not talk to anybody. And we need those moments. Don't get me wrong. I think those are important. But the problem is we stay in those moments. And then we just find like, oh no, I think I like being, no, I'm good by myself. Oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm really tired. Not realizing that it's actually doing more harm than good. We think it's helpful to sit at home and be by ourselves and process. And again, yes, to an extent, certain situations it is, but we're actually potentially harming more than helping when we continue to not connect with the people around us. So whether it's at work, outside of work, we have to make sure that we're still creating those relationships, having those conversations. Because as it mentioned, that being isolated, it's a form of stress and it's just going to add to everything that's already going on. So anybody notice anything I didn't mention as strategies for helping with the stress and down regulating your system? If you want to take a guess, this is kind of a wide open question, but anybody brave enough? Doesn't look like it. Oh, smoking, vaping, eating carbs. Carbs can be good. Okay. Don't take away the carbs. It's when we eat too many of them that it becomes a problem. That's in moderation. But yes, I didn't mention like smoking, vaping. But specifically, just some things. First of all, no pink drink, no cortisol detox, nothing like that is actually going to help with that stuff. We see a lot, especially on social media, the marketing, right? Like, do drink this and your cortisol will go down, and you're not losing weight because you're storing cortisol, and your cortisol's too high, and cortisol this and cortisol that. And yes, cortisol is a stress hormone, but things like that are not going to work the way that people market that they do. It's a good diet with some carbs in moderation, sleep, movement, all those things that we know, like in the back of our mind, we're supposed to be doing, but we don't want to. We just want to look for an easy fix because we're stressed and we're tired. But anything like that that's telling you it's going to reduce your cortisol, like again, the cortisol detoxes or pink, like certain drinks, anything like that, not actually working that way. Now, they may be helpful and you may feel better with them because they have nutrients. They have other kind of supplements in them that may help you feel better. But when it comes down to it, if we really want to reduce those stress levels, it's the breathing, it's the movement, it's the meditation, it's the eating a good, healthy, balanced diet, it's getting sleep, and it's staying connected. The other thing, I kind of already mentioned it, is our phones. It's easy, again, to feel like I'm connected to people. I'm on this virtual Zoom. I'm talking to people. That's connection, right? Maybe a little bit, but again, it's that in-person, authentic connection, conversations that we have with people that really are going to be helpful. The other thing is, you may feel like, oh, I just got off this really tough 911 call. I'm going to just pick up my phone and scroll mindlessly on TikTok. And it feels like, or it seems like this, was a mindless activity, but it's eating up the same amount of cognitive energy that it was to take that call or to work on anything else, even though it can seem mindless. I saw an analogy that's like it's like being at the gym and getting off the treadmill and saying, I'm going to go take a break, and then getting on a stationary bike. Like that's not how that works. And so we also have to be cognizant of how much am I picking up my phone? As soon as the call is over or I'm done dispatching, am I just picking up my phone and scrolling? Because again, that's going to make us just as tired, just as stressed as anything else we might be doing in the center. Instead, can we leave the phone alone? Can we stand up, stretch? Can we take some deep breaths? Can we go for a walk, maybe see outside, get some fresh air? Can we do a 5-minute meditation instead? And it is very tempting. And I'm not speaking to you as someone who has mastered this by any stretch of the imagination. My current challenge for myself is to get away from not just picking up my phone and immediately like checking email. I have not quite mastered like not picking it up first thing, but I do stop myself from trying to get away from like not checking social media within the first half hour to hour after I wake up, not checking my email within the first half hour to hour after I wake up, and at least starting there, baby steps, because it is tough. It's tough to get out of that. It's a habit. And so even just starting there with yourself of like, I just got done with a call, I'm not going to pick up my phone. I just got done watching this virtual session. I'm going to walk away from the computer. I'm not going to pick up my phone. I'm just going to go stretch, have a little screen-free couple moments before the next session, excuse me. Those kinds of things are what's going to help. So how do we integrate these things into our daily life? Feel free, you guys have mentioned kind of how you deal with stress already, but has anybody found success in integrating certain things that seem to make it easier or easier to remember when it comes to stress reduction? Like I mentioned, I'm working personally on not grabbing the phone as quickly, but then also if I grab it, maybe it's to like turn on music, but not to check email, check social media, those kinds of things. Also making sure that I'm taking the deep breaths, the physiological sighs between calls, and just starting there with that basic, those very basics. You can also start to habit stack, right? So if you brush your teeth every day, hopefully you do, maybe at that point you take 3 deep breaths or you do 10 squats or whatever that looks like, because it's far easier to stack it on already an existing habit than it is to try to just do it on its own. Because a lot of times we'll then forget or we don't feel like doing it. Yeah, just even being intentional with our time, I think is really good. Even just starting there of like, what am I doing with my day? Am I wasting a ton of time? Am I making sure I'm getting stuff done that I need to get done? Um, if you're making coffee in the morning, or maybe you get to work and make coffee, is there something that you can do while you stand there and wait for your coffee? Maybe that's 2 minutes of meditation. Maybe that's just 2 minutes of not staring at your phone and just being there. And learning how to even be bored again. Being bored is not a bad thing. Jennifer said, I started dimming the lights to teach my puppy it's almost bedtime. It's helping me get sleepy and keep a better bedtime too. Yeah, those triggers in that way, that is like it signals to us. Mine is not good because mine is to turn on the Golden Girls, which now makes me sleepy because I played at bedtime, but then I have this bright light in my face, so not ideal either. But those things that help us get into a routine, that let our body know, hey, it's time to wind down, because those also help us get better sleep when we have a routine, especially coming off night shift, when your body already feels like it's working against that circadian rhythm and you're like, it's light outside, but I go to bed. Getting in a routine can really help with that, to signal to your body, like, we are winding down. It is our bedtime. I remember coming off of night shift and I switched to day shift. So night shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I would get off and I like kind of had a certain routine where I would go and I would like sit on my couch and just hang out. And then I go to the bed and I go to sleep. And I found when I switched to day shift, that was 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. If I went home at 3 p.m. and I like sat on my couch for too long, my body was like, oh, well, it must be bedtime because we worked our shift and we sat on the couch and we did this. And so now, so I had to change that up because I was like wanting to go to bed at 3:30 in the afternoon, and that does not work. But even the routines like that to get us just our mind of like, and help also can help take down the stress too, because our body kind of knows what's coming next. Plenty of different ways to integrate that. Hopefully this gives some insight though, or some ideas for you to think about as you do it. But as we wrap up, let's see here. Again, building it into those daily habits, as I mentioned, and I just didn't click forward to the slide. Feel free to share any questions you have in the chat. Let's see here. Christy said, at the top of every hour during shift, I would make an announcement to move. All that were available would get out of their chair and do some form of movement. I love that. Just holding each other accountable and just reminding each other. That is, sometimes I get mad at my Apple Watch and I'm like I'm on an airplane. I can't really stand up right now, but maybe I can move my legs around a little bit. And so those kind of reminders are really helpful. So if you have somebody who can do that, that's fantastic. Or setting an alarm on your phone or those types of things. But that is all I have. That is my information. I appreciate you guys being here. Your time is valuable, and I thank you for spending it with me. If you have any questions or I can be a resource at all, please feel free to reach out. That is my email, and I'm always happy to help. And I'm thankful to Virtual Academy for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Halcyon.
much, Halcyon.